I'm Claire Bennett. I'm 36 years old, and I'm standing in my parents' backyard. The sun is shining, the barbecue is smoking, and it's our annual family reunion. Sounds nice, right? Wrong. My sister Sophie is gathering everyone around for a special announcement. I see her smug smile, and this familiar knot tightens in my stomach. 20 years of rivalry, and she still finds new ways to hurt me. But here's the twist, the thing she doesn't know. While she's about to publicly humiliate me, I'm holding the keys to her absolute dream lakefront property in my pocket. Sometimes, revenge isn't about destruction. It's about teaching someone a lesson they'll never forget. So before I dive into how I turned the tables on my sister's cruelty, drop a comment below letting me know where you're watching from, and hit that subscribe button if you've ever dealt with a toxic family member. Seriously, you guys, this story is wild. My whole life, growing up as the younger sister to Sophie Bennett, it felt like living in a permanent shadow. From the day I was born, it seemed my existence was a competition I never signed up for. Sophie is 2 years older than me, and as far back as I can remember, she's been determined to outshine me in every possible way. Our childhood home in suburban Connecticut was comfortable, not extravagant. Dad was an engineer, Mom taught elementary school. They raised us with solid middle-class values: work hard, save money, be kind to others. But those lessons landed differently on each of us. I was always the practical one. While other teenagers blew their babysitting money on makeup and trendy clothes, I was saving for college. My room was always organized, my grades were excellent, and I had a 5-year plan before I even started high school. Nothing flashy, just consistent and determined. Sophie? Oh, Sophie developed expensive tastes early. She wanted designer labels, exotic vacations, constant validation. Where I saw value in hard work and delayed gratification, Sophie focused on appearance and immediate status. She wasn't necessarily malicious as a child, just insecure and desperate for attention. The first time I really remember her taking credit for my work was in 4th grade. I had spent weeks on a science project, a detailed terrarium about ecosystems that my teacher called college-level work. But at parents' night, I overheard Sophie telling her friends she'd helped me with all the hard parts, because I couldn't understand the science. I was hurt, but I said nothing. That became our pattern, her taking, me retreating. By high school, that dynamic was firmly established. Sophie would find ways to diminish my achievements or claim them as her own. When I got into Cornell on a partial scholarship, Sophie told our extended family she'd coached me through the application process. When I graduated with honors in business, she somehow made it sound like my success was just following in her footsteps, even though she dropped out of community college after 1 semester. Our parents? They never really recognized the pattern. Dad would gently suggest I not be so sensitive, while Mom insisted that Sophie just expresses herself differently. They loved us both, of course, but they inadvertently enabled Sophie's behavior for years, probably finding it easier to placate her than confront her manipulations. After college, I started building my e-commerce business from scratch. I saw a market gap in sustainable home goods, and I worked hour days developing relationships with ethical manufacturers. The first 2 years were brutal. I lived on ramen noodles in a tiny studio apartment, pouring every penny back into the business. Sophie, meanwhile, bounced between retail jobs, always quitting when they became too demanding or beneath her talents. Then my business took off. By year 3, I had employees and had tripled my revenue. By year 5, I was featured in Entrepreneur magazine as one of the under to watch. Suddenly, Sophie was telling everyone how she had always believed in me and had given me the confidence to succeed. At family gatherings, she'd position herself as my biggest supporter and unofficial business advisor. I learned to choose my battles and keep my private life private. While Sophie rented a luxury apartment she could barely afford and leased a new BMW every 2 years, I lived modestly in a comfortable but unassuming townhouse and drove my reliable Honda into the ground. I invested in my retirement, built an emergency fund, and created real financial security. Sophie just assumed I was bad with money rather than strategic with it. 3 years ago, during a family vacation to Lake Winnipesaukee in New Hampshire, Sophie became obsessed with this stunning lakefront property. It had a private docks, panoramic views, and was listed at $1 million, far beyond her means. Still, she spent the entire trip talking about her future lake house, taking photos of every room during an open house, and making plans for family gatherings she would host there. Every family event since then has included her lamenting that someone else bought her dream house, even though she never had the finances to seriously consider it. What no one in my family knew was that 6 months ago, my business hit a temporary rough patch. A major supplier went bankrupt, leaving me with thousands of dollars in unfulfilled orders and angry customers. At the same time, an algorithm change on a major marketplace slashed my visibility. It was a perfect storm. I knew it was temporary, but my cash flow took a serious hit, and I had to take out a short-term business loan to stay afloat. Sophie somehow discovered my financial challenges, probably by snooping through papers during a visit to my home. I'd caught her rifling through my mail once, but I dismissed it. I should have known better. Then last month, through a complete coincidence, the Lake Winnipesaukee house, Sophie's dream property, came back on the market. The price was reduced due to the owner's divorce. The moment I saw the listing, an idea began to form. It was risky, perhaps petty, but something in me couldn't resist. I contacted the real estate agent and discovered the owners needed a quick sale. They were willing to accept dollars for a property worth much more. I spent 3 sleepless nights running numbers, talking to my financial advisor, and weighing the consequences. And I decided to liquidate a significant portion of my emergency savings and investment portfolio. I created an LLC to keep my name off public records and made an all-cash offer. The timing was incredibly tight. The closing was scheduled for the Saturday morning of our annual family reunion. Part of me questioned if I was making a huge mistake, both financially and ethically. Was I using my hard-earned money just to teach my sister a lesson? Or was this finally my chance to establish boundaries that had been crossed for decades? As I signed the preliminary paperwork, I kept telling myself this wasn't about revenge. It was about finally standing up for myself, after years of allowing Sophie's behavior to go unchecked. Still, a small voice wondered if I was becoming exactly what I resented in my sister, someone willing to use money as a weapon. This brings us back to the present, to that family reunion. As I pulled into my parents' driveway, my stomach churned with anxiety. My business troubles weren't catastrophic, but they weren't something I was eager to discuss either. I'd had to let 3 employees go temporarily and scale back operations while rebuilding my supply chain. To someone like Sophie, who understood business about as well as she understood quantum physics, these normal entrepreneurial challenges would look like complete failure. I checked my phone one more time before getting out of the car. No message from the real estate agent yet about the closing. I took a deep breath, grabbed the homemade appetizers from my passenger seat. Keeping up appearances was important today. "Claire, you finally made it!" My mother rushed across the lawn to greet me. "Everyone's already here. Even your cousin Jenna from Seattle made it this year." The backyard was transformed as it always was every July. White folding tables, red and blue balloons, Dad's prized grill smoking. "Where's Sophie?" I asked, trying to sound casual. Mom's expression shifted subtly. "Oh, she's around somewhere, probably inside with Aunt Patricia. She's been acting mysterious all morning. Says she has some big announcement to make later." The warning bells in my head grew louder. Mom quickly added, "I'm sure it's nothing. You know how she loves to create drama." Maybe she finally got that promotion at the department store. I nodded and forced a smile. Yeah, probably. As I made my way through the crowd, collecting hugs and cheek kisses, I felt disconnected. My eyes kept scanning for Sophie, anticipating whatever she was planning. I spotted her near the drinks table, huddled with our cousin Rachel and Aunt Patricia. When Sophie saw me looking, she smiled with false brightness and waved, then whispered something that made the other 2 look in my direction with pitying expressions. "Don't let her get to you," my cousin Emma said, offering me a glass of wine. Emma was the only one I'd confided in about my business challenges. She ran a successful accounting firm and had helped me restructure some debt. "Whatever she's planning, it says more about her than about you." "I know," I sighed, accepting the drink gratefully. "I just wish I understood why she's like this. We're in our S, for God's sake. Shouldn't sibling rivalry have an expiration date?" Emma snorted. "In functional families, maybe. But Sophie's built her entire identity around comparing herself to you. The fact that you're actually successful while she's still pretending to be makes it worse." We were interrupted by my father's booming voice calling everyone to the tables for lunch. My assigned seat was directly across from Sophie, of course. Mom's seating charts always seemed designed for maximum dramatic potential. Sophie was already holding court, describing her recent weekend trip to the Hamptons, courtesy of a friend whose name she conspicuously avoided mentioning. Her outfit screamed trying too hard, a designer dress that still had the security tag hastily removed. "Claire," she exclaimed when I sat down, with the exaggerated enthusiasm of someone performing for an audience. "I was just telling everyone about this amazing investment opportunity I've been considering. Real estate is where the real money is, don't you think?" The pointed question made my chest tighten. Did she already know about the lake house? No, that was impossible. The paperwork wasn't even finalized yet. "It can be," I answered neutrally, serving myself some potato salad. "If you know what you're doing." She leaned forward, lowering her voice to a stage whisper audible to everyone nearby. "Well, I've been doing some research on financial stability. It's so important to diversify before a major market downturn. Some businesses just aren't built to weather economic storms, you know?" Several relatives shifted uncomfortably, clearly sensing the barb beneath her words. I felt heat rising to my cheeks, but kept my expression neutral, taking a deliberate sip of wine. I wouldn't give her the satisfaction of a reaction. The lunch progressed with increasing tension. More family members started giving me those same pitying looks. Cousin Derek asked with suspicious casualness how business was going these days, while Aunt Patricia suggested she knew someone hiring administrative assistants if I was looking for something more stable. By the time dessert was served, I was mentally exhausted from maintaining my composure. I excused myself to the bathroom, needing a moment alone. In the quiet of my parents' powder room, I checked my phone again. One new message from the real estate agent. "Paperwork ready for final signatures tomorrow morning. AM, congratulations on your new lake house." A strange calm settled over me. Whatever Sophie was planning, I now had certainty about my counterplay. I looked at myself in the mirror, straightened my shoulders, and rejoined the party. I found Uncle Robert near the dessert table. He had always been my favorite relative, a quiet, observant man who seemed to see through family dynamics with X-ray vision. "Your sister's on a mission today," he commented as I approached. "Apparently so," I replied, selecting a brownie. "Any idea what her big announcement is about?" Uncle Robert gave me a knowing look. "Nothing good, judging by how much whispering she's been doing. But I'll tell you something I learned in years of marriage to your Aunt Linda. People who need to tear others down are standing on pretty shaky ground themselves." I smiled gratefully at him. "I know you're right. I just wish—" The sharp clinking of metal against glass interrupted me. We turned to see Sophie standing at the head of the table, beaming with barely contained excitement, a silver spoon in her hand. "Everyone, could I have your attention, please? I have something important to share with all of you." The backyard fell silent as everyone turned toward Sophie. She stood with perfect posture, her expression a masterclass in manufactured concern. My heart pounded as I made my way back to my seat, already knowing what was coming but powerless to stop it. "First, I want to thank Mom and Dad for hosting another wonderful reunion," Sophie began. Raising her glass in their direction, they beamed, oblivious to what was about to happen. "Family is everything to me, which is why I feel it's so important to share when one of us is struggling." She paused dramatically, her eyes finding mine across the tables. The artificial sympathy in her expression made my stomach turn. "I'm sure many of you have noticed that our dear Claire seems different today, more reserved than usual," she continued. Murmurs of agreement rippled through the crowd. "Well, I think it's time we address the elephant in the room, because Claire needs our support right now." I gripped my napkin under the table, knuckles turning white. Emma, sitting nearby, shot me a concerned look. "It breaks my heart to tell you all this," Sophie continued, her voice trembling with entirely fake emotion. "But Claire's business has failed. She's filed for bankruptcy." The collective gasp was exactly what Sophie had hoped for. Shocked faces turned toward me, some with genuine concern, others with barely concealed curiosity. The word bankruptcy hung in the air like a toxic cloud. "I discovered the paperwork last week," she added, conveniently omitting how she'd obtained this completely false information. "She's lost everything, her inventory, her warehouse, even her business accounts. The bank is reviewing her personal assets now." My mother's hand flew to her mouth. "Claire, honey, is this true? Why didn't you tell us?" Before I could answer, Sophie jumped in again. "She was too ashamed, Mom. You know how proud she's always been about her little business. But we're family. There's no room for secrets or shame here." The twist of the knife was expert, positioning herself as the caring sister while simultaneously diminishing my decade of hard work as a little business and violating my privacy in the most public way possible. Actually, I started to say, but Sophie wasn't finished. I've already told her she can move into my spare bedroom until she gets back on her feet. I've also reached out to some contacts about potential job opportunities. Her voice dripped with self-congratulatory generosity. It might be good for her to experience working for someone else for a change. More stability, less pressure, a flash of memory. 3 years earlier, when Sophie had been fired from yet another job, I had offered her a position in my company's customer service department. She had laughed and said she couldn't possibly work for her little sister, the same sister she was now publicly humiliating while presenting herself as a savior. Dad stood up, his face flushed with concern. "Claire, why are we just hearing about this now? We could have helped." All eyes were on me. The truth was simple. There was no bankruptcy. Yes, my business had cash flow problems, but we were already recovering. The new supplier I'd secured was better than the previous one, and my team had developed an innovative marketing approach to overcome the algorithm changes. But explaining all of this now would sound defensive, like excuses manufactured in the face of humiliation. I took a deep breath. "Thank you for your concern, everyone, but Sophie doesn't have all the facts." I kept my voice steady, making deliberate eye contact with my sister. "My business is going through some restructuring, but it's far from bankruptcy. I appreciate the concern, but I'm handling it." Sophie's smile faltered slightly, but she recovered quickly. "Oh, Claire, there's no need to put on a brave face. I've seen the paperwork. Chapter bankruptcy isn't something you can just brush off." The specificity of her lie, naming chapter rather than chapter ta, was calculated to lend credibility. Several relatives nodded, clearly believing her detailed knowledge over my vague denial. "Perhaps we should discuss this privately, Pat," I suggested, struggling to maintain composure. "We're all family here," Sophie insisted, spreading her arms wide. "There's nothing to be embarrassed about. Failure is part of life, though some of us warned you about expanding too quickly." She had never warned me about anything of the sort. In fact, she had repeatedly criticized me for being too cautious with growth. The blatant rewriting of history was infuriating. I excused myself quietly and walked toward the house, feeling dozens of eyes on my back. Inside, in the cool quiet of my parents' kitchen, I leaned against the counter and took several deep breaths. My phone buzzed with a text from Emma. "Want me to accidentally spill wine on her designer dress?" Despite everything, I smiled. Then another text arrived, this one from the real estate agent with an attachment. "Final contract for your review before tomorrow's signing." Uncle Robert appeared in the doorway, his kind eyes full of concern. "Your sister's quite the performer," he said, closing the door behind him to give us privacy. "She certainly has a flair for drama," I agreed, putting my phone away. He settled into one of the kitchen chairs, gesturing for me to join him. "You know, I've watched you two since you were little girls. Sophie's always been the peacock, all flash and noise, but you, Claire, you're the owl. Quiet, observant, smarter than people realize." I smiled weakly. Not smart enough to avoid this ambush, apparently. "I don't believe for a second that you're bankrupt," he said firmly. "But even if you were, so what? You think any of us would love you less? Success isn't what makes you valuable to this family." His words touched something deep within me. For years, I defined myself in opposition to Sophie. She was flashy, so I was understated. She was impulsive, so I was strategic. Perhaps I'd been so focused on not being like her that I'd missed opportunities to simply be myself. "Thank you," I said quietly. "That means a lot." "So what's your plan?" he asked, eyes twinkling. Because I know Claire Bennett well enough to know she's got one. I hesitated, then nodded. "I do, and it happens tomorrow morning." "Good," he said, standing up. "Now let's get back out there before your mother organizes a fundraiser for your non-existent bankruptcy." We returned to the backyard where Sophie was still holding court, detailing her generous plans to help me rebuild my life. I took my seat and ate a piece of pie, letting her words wash over me. Tomorrow would come soon enough. The remainder of the reunion unfolded like an extended nightmare. What should have been a joyful family gathering had transformed into Claire's bankruptcy intervention. Relatives I hadn't spoken to in years suddenly became financial advisors, approaching me with business cards for entry-level positions and stories about their friends who had bounced back after complete financial ruin. Aunt Diane cornered me by the lemonade table. "Have you considered multi-level marketing? My neighbor's daughter makes 6 figures selling essential oils." She pressed a pamphlet into my hand before I could respond. Cousin Greg, who had failed at 3 businesses himself, offered to look over my financials and suggest where I went wrong. The irony was apparently lost on him. Uncle Stephen provided a detailed explanation of unemployment benefits, speaking slowly as if I might not understand the concept of government assistance. Through it all, Sophie floated around the gathering, alternating between expressions of exaggerated sympathy when near me and barely concealed satisfaction when she thought I wasn't looking. She had positioned herself as both the bearer of difficult truths and my potential savior, a masterful manipulation that painted her as the mature, successful sister stepping in to rescue her struggling sibling. "Claire, I've been thinking about your wardrobe," she said loudly as several aunts listened nearby. "When you move in with me, we can go through my closet. I have some professional outfits that would be perfect for job interviews." The suggestion that I would need her hand-me-downs when my closet contained higher quality, if less flashy clothing than hers, was deliberately demeaning. I smiled tightly and excused myself. My parents, to their credit, seemed uncertain what to believe. Mom kept bringing me extra portions of food, as if financial problems might have left me malnourished. Dad awkwardly mentioned that his retirement fund was in good shape if emergency cash was needed. Their concern was genuine, but their willingness to accept Sophie's story without question hurt almost as much as her betrayal. As afternoon faded into evening and tiki torches were lit around the yard, I found myself sitting alone on the old wooden swing at the edge of the property. The same swing where I'd retreated as a child when Sophie's taunting became too much. Some patterns never change. "Mind if I join you?" I looked up to see my cousin Emma holding 2 glasses of wine. I shifted over on the swing, and she settled beside me, handing me one of the glasses. "Remember when we were kids and Sophie told everyone at Christmas that you still wet the bed?" Emma asked after a moment of silence. I groaned at the memory. I was 9, and she had all the adults checking if my sheets were dry every morning for the rest of the visit. "And do you remember what happened the next summer?" A smile tugged at my lips. "She got poison ivy from that secret fort she built in the woods, after I casually mentioned that poison ivy has 3 leaves. Emma clinked her glass against mine. "You've always played the long game, Claire. That's why I'm not worried about you now." My phone vibrated with an incoming call. Sophie's name flashed on the screen. "Speaking of the devil," I muttered, declining the call. Within seconds, she appeared at the edge of the lawn, spotting us on the swing. Her determined walk in our direction made Emma whisper, "Incoming drama at Kakao," before excusing herself with a supportive squeeze of my arm. Sophie took the vacated spot, her designer dress incongruous on the rustic swing. Up close, I could see the strain beneath her perfect makeup, tiny lines of tension around her eyes, the slightly too rigid smile. "You're avoiding me," she said, feigning hurt. "Can you blame me?" "Don't be so sensitive, Claire. I was just being honest with the family. They deserve to know." I turned to face her directly. "Know what exactly?" "That you went through my private papers, misinterpreted what you found, and decided to announce your flawed conclusions to the entire extended family without speaking to me first? Is that the honesty you're defending?" Her eyes narrowed slightly. "I saw the bankruptcy forms, Claire. Stop trying to save face. What you saw were contingency documents my lawyer prepared as a worst-case scenario. They were never filed. My business had a setback, not a failure." For a moment, doubt flickered across her face, but she quickly recovered. "Well, the family needed to know either way. I'm just looking out for you. I've already told everyone you can stay with me until you get back on your feet. My spare room is small, but it's better than nothing, which is apparently what you have now." The calculated cruelty of her words struck me like a physical blow. This wasn't just about embarrassing me. She wanted to see me dependent on her, diminished in the family's eyes while she played the generous protector. "I'm not moving in with you, Sophie. My business is fine, my house is fine, and my life is fine without your intervention." She stood up, smoothing her dress with manicured hands. "We'll see about that. I've already told everyone we're meeting with a financial advisor on Monday to discuss your options. I'm not letting you push away help because of pride." As she walked away, my phone buzzed with a text notification. It was from her, sent to the entire family group chat. So worried about Claire, she's in denial about her situation. If anyone has job leads for her, please send them my way since she's too proud to ask directly. I stared at the message, watching as sympathetic responses poured in from relatives. The public performance continued even as the party wound down. The depth of her need to see me humbled was staggering. Later, as I helped my mother clean up the kitchen, she approached the subject cautiously. "Honey, about what Sophie said. Is it really as bad as she's making it sound?" I placed the serving dishes I'd been washing on the drying rack and turned to face her. "Mom, do you really think if I were filing for bankruptcy, you'd hear about it from Sophie at a family reunion?" She had the grace to look embarrassed. "I suppose not, but she seemed so certain. And you've been so quiet lately." My business had some challenges with a supplier, but we're already recovering. What Sophie did today was share private information incorrectly, I might add, without my permission. And instead of asking me directly, everyone just assumed she was telling the truth. Mom dried her hands on a kitchen towel, her expression troubled. "You know how Sophie gets. She's always been sensitive about your success." The familiar pattern of excusing Sophie's behavior made my jaw clench. "That's not sensitivity, Mom. It's cruelty." Before she could respond, my phone rang. It was the real estate agent. I excused myself and stepped onto the back porch to take the call. "Claire, great news. All the paperwork is processed. We're confirmed for 10 a.m. tomorrow to finalize everything. The owners have already moved out, so you'll get the keys right after signing." As I ended the call, I noticed Sophie watching me from across the yard. Her eyes narrowed with suspicion. In that moment, I made my decision. The lake house wouldn't just be an investment property. It would be the setting for a long overdue conversation between sisters. Sunday morning dawned bright and clear, the kind of perfect summer day New England is famous for. I woke early, despite having tossed and turned all night in my childhood bedroom. My parents had insisted I stay over after the reunion, concerned about my emotional state following Sophie's announcement. I dressed carefully in a crisp white button-down and navy slacks. Professional but not showy, the outfit was a deliberate choice, one that said successful businesswoman, without screaming for attention. As I applied minimal makeup, I rehearsed what I would say to Sophie. This wasn't about revenge, it was about boundaries and truth. Downstairs, I found my father at the kitchen table with his customary Sunday crossword puzzle. He looked up when I entered, surprise registering at my attire. "You're dressed up for a Sunday morning," he commented, setting down his pen. "I have a meeting," I explained, pouring myself coffee. "A business opportunity that couldn't wait." He studied me for a moment. "Claire, about yesterday. Your mother and I are worried. If things are difficult financially, we want to help. No judgment." I sat across from him, wrapping my hands around the warm mug. "Dad, I need you to hear me clearly. I am not filing for bankruptcy. My business had a temporary cash flow issue that's already resolving itself. What Sophie told everyone yesterday was both incorrect and an invasion of my privacy." His expression shifted from concern to confusion. "But she said she saw the paperwork. She saw preliminary documents my lawyer prepared as a contingency plan, which is standard business practice during financial restructuring. Those papers were never filed. If you don't believe me, you're welcome to call my accountant tomorrow." Dad looked down at his crossword, embarrassment coloring his face. "I should have asked you directly." "Yes, you should have." I kept my voice gentle but firm. "For years, you and Mom have given Sophie the benefit of the doubt while expecting me to be the bigger person. I'm tired of it, Dad." The silence between us stretched, heavy with decades of unaddressed family dynamics. Finally, he nodded. "You're right, we've enabled her difficulties with you. I'm sorry, Claire." His acknowledgement, however belated, was something I hadn't realized I needed so desperately. I reached across the table and squeezed his hand. "Thank you." "So what's this meeting about?" he asked, clearly trying to change the subject to safer territory. I smiled. "A property investment. Actually, I should get going. I'm meeting the agent at E." As I gathered my purse and keys, my phone buzzed with a group text from Sophie to the family. "Taking Claire to brunch today to discuss next steps. We'll update everyone on her situation later. So grateful for all your support during her difficult time." The audacity was breathtaking. I hadn't agreed to any brunch, yet she was continuing the narrative of herself as my caretaker. I texted back quickly, Actually, I have a meeting this morning. Rain check. Her response was immediate. What meeting? Financial advisors don't work Sundays. Stop avoiding help. Rather than engaging further in the group chat, I sent her a private message. Meet me at the Starbucks on Lakeshore Drive in Winnipesaukee. We need to talk. I could almost feel her satisfaction through the phone. She undoubtedly thought I was finally admitting defeat and seeking her help. Her reply was sugary sweet. Of course, sis, I'll be there to support you. The drive to Lake Winnipesaukee took just under 2 hours. I used the time to center myself, occasionally glancing at the folder of closing documents on my passenger seat. By the time I arrived at the real estate office, I felt calm and focused. The closing process was remarkably straightforward. I signed my name dozens of times, initialed countless pages, and transferred the largest sum of money I'd ever moved in one transaction. When it was done, the agent handed me 3 sets of keys. Congratulations, Ms. Bennett. The lake house is officially yours. I drove the short distance to the property, parking in the circular driveway of what was now my vacation home. The realtor hadn't exaggerated. It was stunning. The 2-story cedar and stone structure faced the lake with a wraparound porch and floor-to-ceiling windows, capturing the breathtaking water views. A private dock extended into the clear blue lake, with a small boathouse at its end. I unlocked the front door and stepped inside. Hardwood floors gleamed in the sunlight, streaming through the windows. The previous owners had left some furniture. A massive stone fireplace dominated the great room, flanked by built-in bookshelves and comfortable seating. The kitchen featured high-end appliances and granite countertops. Upstairs, the master suite offered panoramic lake views and a spa-like bathroom. It was exactly as Sophie had described it countless times over the past 3 years. Her dream home that she would definitely buy someday when she got her big break. I walked through each room slowly, taking mental inventory. Though the purchase had been partly motivated by wanting to teach Sophie a lesson, I was surprised by how much I genuinely loved the property. It was peaceful here, the kind of place where I could actually relax away from the demands of my business. At Eurofons, I texted Sophie. Change of plans, meet me at Lakeshore Drive instead of Starbucks. Where is that? She replied immediately. Just put it in your GPS. See you soon. I made a pot of coffee and brought 2 mugs out to the porch swing overlooking the lake. The morning sun danced across the water, and a light breeze carried the scent of pine and fresh water. Despite the confrontation to come, I felt a profound sense of peace. At precisely, Sophie was perpetually late. I heard a car pull into the driveway. Through the trees, I spotted her red BMW convertible coming to a stop behind my Honda. She emerged, looking confused, checking her phone as if confirming the address. Her confusion deepened as she approached the house, taking in the expansive property with a puzzled expression. When she spotted me on the porch, her perfectly shaped eyebrows drew together. Claire, what are you doing here? Whose house is this? She climbed the porch steps, designer sunglasses perched on her head, looking wildly out of place in her brunch-appropriate outfit. I gestured to the swing beside me. Have a seat. Coffee? She remained standing, looking increasingly perplexed. Seriously, what is this place? Are you house-sitting for someone? I took a sip of my coffee, savoring the moment. You don't recognize it. That's surprising, considering how many times you've talked about it being your dream home. Her eyes widened as recognition dawned. She spun around, taking in the property with new awareness. This is the lake house, the one that sold 3 years ago. It went back on the market last month. Divorce sale, I said, holding out a set of keys. Would you like to see inside? She stared at the keys, then at me, comprehension slowly replacing confusion. You bought this house? How? You're bankrupt. And there it was, the explicit admission that she knew her public announcement had been a lie. That's what I wanted to talk to you about, Sophie. I'm not bankrupt. I never was. Sophie stood frozen on the porch, her gaze darting between the keys in my hand and my face. The carefully constructed narrative she'd created of her successful self, rescuing her failing sister, was crumbling before her eyes. But I saw the paperwork, she insisted, her voice losing its usual confidence. The bankruptcy forms were contingency documents, never filed, I said, setting the keys on the small table between us. My business had a temporary cash flow issue when a supplier went bankrupt. We're already back on track with a better supplier and stronger marketing strategy. She sank onto the porch swing beside me, designer purse clutched in her lap like a shield. So you're not moving in with me? No, Sophie, I never was. But why did you let me tell everyone? Let you, I interrupted, feeling a surge of the anger I'd suppressed yesterday. You went through my private papers without permission, jumped to incorrect conclusions, and announced false information to our entire family without ever speaking to me directly. I didn't let you do anything. She had the grace to look momentarily embarrassed, but it quickly shifted to defensiveness. I was worried about you. I was trying to help. Were you, or were you enjoying watching me squirm while positioning yourself as the generous, successful sister? Her silence was answer enough. I continued more gently. Sophie, we need to talk about this pattern between us. It's been going on since we were children, and I've let it continue by staying quiet. That ends today. She looked out over the lake, avoiding my gaze. What pattern? You're the one who's always been perfect. The smart one, the responsible one, the successful entrepreneur. Do you have any idea what it's like living in your shadow? The irony of her statement was almost laughable. My shadow, Sophie, you've spent our entire adult lives positioning yourself as more successful than me, taking credit for my achievements, dismissing my business as a little project, and constantly one-upping me with material possessions you can barely afford. That's not true. Her protest sounded hollow, even to her own ears, judging by her expression. Isn't it? Let's look at yesterday. You had the perfect opportunity to check in with me privately about those documents you found. Instead, you chose to announce it to the entire family in the most humiliating way possible. Why? She stared at her manicured nails, uncharacteristically silent. I continued carefully, it's because you've built your identity around being seen as more successful than me. When you found those papers, you saw an opportunity to cement that perception once and for all. A tear slipped down her cheek, leaving a trail in her perfect makeup. It's not fair, she whispered. You make everything look so easy, the business, the investments, all of it. You never struggle, never fail. That's not true, Sophie. I struggle all the time. The difference is that I don't measure my worth by comparing myself to you, I said, handing her a tissue from my pocket. And for the record, buying this house was financially risky. I liquidated a significant portion of my emergency fund and investments to make it happen. She dabbed at her eyes, careful not to smudge her mascara. Then why did you do it? I gestured at the breathtaking lake view. Partly as an investment. Lakefront property in New Hampshire holds value extremely well. I paused, deciding to be completely honest. And partly to prove a point. When I saw it was for sale, something in me snapped. After years of hearing you talk about your dream house while simultaneously undermining my success, I wanted to show you that actions have consequences. To my surprise, a small laugh escaped her. That's actually pretty badass, Claire. Petty, but badass. The unexpected moment of genuine amusement between us broke some of the tension. I smiled despite myself. I prefer to think of it as a valuable lesson in boundaries. So what now? She asked, gesturing around us. You bought a house to spite me. Are you going to let me visit, or is this your way of cutting me out of your life? It was the question I'd been asking myself since making the offer on the property. That depends on you, Sophie, I said. I didn't buy this house just to keep you out of it. I bought it because I'm tired of the dynamic between us, and something needed to change. I stood up and walked to the porch railing, looking out over the water. The truth is, I miss my sister. Not the person who humiliates me at family gatherings or takes credit for my achievements, but the girl who used to make me laugh until milk came out my nose at breakfast, the one who taught me how to French braid my hair and stayed up all night with me when I was scared during thunderstorms. When I turned back, Sophie was watching me with an expression I hadn't seen in years. Vulnerability without calculation. I miss her too, she said quietly. Then let's try something new, I suggested. Complete honesty, starting now. Why did you announce my supposed bankruptcy to the family? She sighed deeply, setting her purse aside. Because I'm drowning, Claire. My credit cards are maxed out. I'm 3 months behind on my car payments. The department store put me on performance review because my sales numbers are down. Nothing in my life is working. And then I found those papers and thought I'm finally something where I'm doing better than Claire. The raw admission hung between us. It was perhaps the first completely honest thing she'd said to me in years. Thank you for telling me that, I said softly. Why didn't you just ask me for help? Because I'm supposed to be the successful one. The words burst out of her. I'm the older sister. I'm supposed to have it all figured out by now. How could I admit that my little sister has a real business while I'm still folding sweaters at a department store at... I sat back down beside her. Sophie, success isn't just about money or job titles, and it's definitely not a competition between sisters. Easy for you to say when you're winning, she muttered, but without real malice. Am I? I work hour weeks. I haven't taken a real vacation in 5 years. My last relationship ended because I was always at the office. There are plenty of ways I'm not winning at life. She looked surprised, as if the idea that my life wasn't perfect had never occurred to her. I guess we both created narratives about each other that aren't completely true. Exactly, I said. So here's my proposal. This house has 5 bedrooms. One of them is mine. Another could be yours on some conditions. Her eyes widened. You'd let me use the lake house after what I did? If, I emphasized, you agreed to some ground rules. First, no more public humiliation or taking credit for my achievements. Second, we start being honest with each other about our finances, our struggles, everything. Third, you tell the family the truth about your announcement yesterday. She winced at the last condition. They'll think I'm terrible. They'll think you made a mistake, and if you own it, they'll respect your honesty. She considered this, then nodded slowly. And in return, I get to use this gorgeous house sometimes? More than that, I said. You get a chance for us to be real sisters again, not competitors. And, I added, I'll help you get your finances under control if you want. No judgment, just practical support. For a moment, I thought she might reject the offer out of pride. Then her shoulders relaxed, and for the first time in years, I saw my actual sister, not the performance she usually put on. I'd like that, she said simply. I extended my hand. Then we have a deal. She ignored my hand and pulled me into a tight hug instead. Deal, she whispered against my shoulder. As we separated, I picked up the keys from the table and placed them in her hand. Why don't you give yourself the tour? I'll make some more coffee. While Sophie explored the house, exclaiming over features she'd coveted for years, I called my parents. It was time for the family to hear the truth from both of us. 2 weeks after that family reunion, we gathered again, this time at the lake house. The invitation had gone out to the entire extended family, surprising everyone with its joint signature. Claire and Sophie Bennett request the pleasure of your company. The spacious great room was filled with relatives, many still confused about what exactly was happening. My parents arrived first, Mom's eyes widening as she took in the property. Claire, it's stunning, she breathed, walking straight to the wall of windows overlooking the lake. But I don't understand. When did you buy this? The morning after the reunion, I explained, accepting her hug. I'd been in negotiations for a few weeks before that. Dad examined the craftsmanship of the built-in bookshelves with appreciation. Not exactly the purchase I'd expect from someone filing for bankruptcy, he commented. Right about that, I began, but was interrupted by Sophie's arrival. She entered carrying a tray of appetizers she'd prepared herself. Another surprise for anyone who knew my sister's usual aversion to cooking. She had dressed differently today, still stylish, but noticeably less flashy than her usual attire. The designer sunglasses and statement jewelry were absent. As more relatives arrived, curiosity filled the room. Uncle Robert caught my eye from across the space and gave me an approving nod. Emma arrived with a bottle of champagne, whispering, "Ready for the show I'm about to witness?" as she handed it to me. When everyone had arrived, Sophie clinked a glass for attention. The room fell silent, many clearly expecting another dramatic announcement. She looked momentarily nervous, then squared her shoulders. "Thank you all for coming," she began. "I asked you here today because I owe you, and especially Claire, an apology." The surprise in the room was palpable. Sophie Bennett did not apologize, ever. "At the family reunion, I told you all that Claire had filed for bankruptcy. That was untrue." Her voice trembled slightly, but she continued. "I found some contingency paperwork her lawyer had prepared during a business restructuring, jumped to conclusions, and then I chose to announce those conclusions publicly without discussing it with her first." Our mother gasped softly. Aunt Patricia whispered something to Uncle George, but Sophie wasn't finished. "The truth is, Claire's business had a temporary setback that she was already resolving successfully. She is not bankrupt, not even close. In fact," she gestured around us, "she purchased this lake house the very next morning." Murmurs of confusion and surprise rippled through the gathering. I think many of you know this is the property I've talked about wanting for years, Sophie continued. When Claire bought it, I initially felt, angry and jealous to be honest, but it made me realize something important. The competitiveness between us has been mostly driven by me, and it needs to stop. I stepped forward to stand beside her, a united front for perhaps the first time in our adult lives. We wanted to invite you all here today, I added, to clear the air and start fresh. This house isn't about rivalry or revenge. It's going to be a gathering place for our family. Sophie nodded. Claire has generously offered to let me use it too, despite my behavior. That's the kind of sister she's always been. The kind I want to become. The authenticity of her words touched something deep within me. This wasn't the performative Sophie I'd grown used to. This was my actual sister, vulnerable and genuine. Dad was the first to respond, clearing his throat emotionally. I think I speak for everyone when I say we're proud of both of you. This kind of honesty takes courage. The tension in the room dissolved into relieved conversation. Relatives approached us, some to express support, others to sheepishly admit they'd been too quick to believe the bankruptcy story. Uncle Robert gave each of us a bear hug, whispering, "About time," in my ear. In the months that followed, change didn't happen overnight. Old habits occasionally resurfaced. Sophie sometimes slipped into competitiveness, and I sometimes withdrew rather than confronting issues directly. But the foundation had shifted. With my guidance, Sophie developed her first real budget and started addressing her debt. She found a job in retail management that better utilized her people skills and fashion knowledge. She still loved beautiful things, but began to understand the difference between quality and showing off. My business not only recovered but thrived. The new supplier relationships and the marketing strategy developed during our crisis period turned out to be more effective than our previous approach, leading to our most profitable quarter ever. The lake house became exactly what I'd hoped, a sanctuary for family healing. My parents celebrated their anniversary there. Cousins brought their children for summer weekends. Sophie and I established a tradition of monthly sister weekends, gradually rebuilding our relationship conversation by conversation. During one such weekend, as we sat on the dock watching the sunset, Sophie turned to me. "You know, you could have used this house to punish me. You had every right to after what I did. I considered this, dipping my toes in the cool lake water. That was never the goal. I was angry when I made the offer, yes, but deep down, I think I was trying to break the pattern we'd been stuck in for decades." "Well, it worked," she said with a small laugh. Nothing bursts a person's superiority bubble quite like watching their bankrupt sister buy their dream house. The funny thing is, I admitted, this house has become more meaningful than I ever expected. Not because it's beautiful or valuable, but because it's where we finally started being honest with each other. Sophie nodded thoughtfully. "I've been thinking about what you said months ago about measuring worth by comparing yourself to others. I've done that my whole life, not just with you. It's exhausting and ultimately empty." "The constant comparison never leads to happiness," I agreed. "I'm learning that," she said quietly, slowly. As the sun dipped below the tree line, casting golden reflections across the lake, I realized the property had given me something far more valuable than real estate equity. It had given me back my sister and taught me that sometimes the most powerful response to hurt isn't revenge or even forgiveness. It's creating an opportunity for transformation. The bankruptcy announcement that was meant to humiliate me had instead become the catalyst for healing our family's oldest wound. In trying to publicly diminish me, Sophie had unknowingly set us both on a path to something better than success: authenticity and reconnection. That evening, as family members gathered around the fire pit, sharing stories and laughter, I looked around at the faces illuminated by the dancing flames. The journey from hurt to healing hadn't been simple or straightforward, but standing on the other side, I wouldn't change a moment of it. So what's your experience with family rivalries? Have you ever had a turning point that transformed a difficult relationship? Share your stories in the comments below, and if this tale of sisterhood and redemption resonated with you, please hit that subscribe button and give this video a thumbs up. Thank you for being part of this journey, and remember, sometimes the path to healing begins with the very moment designed to break us.